I want you to just close your eyes.
Okay, setting a mood right out of the gate.
Exactly. So I want you to picture the ultimate quintessential late 1990s alpha male. You're probably imagining a very specific archetype, right?
Oh, I have a very clear picture in my head.
Right. A guy with this massive, just gravity-defying blonde pompadour, and he's wearing a skin-tight black shirt that, let's be honest, looks at least 2 sizes small.
Yeah, and the stiff blue jeans, don't forget those.
And the dark sunglasses, the ones that seemingly never come off, whether he's indoors, outdoors, or literally in the pitch black of...
He's just got that heavy-footed swagger,
Yeah.
you know? Like an Elvis Presley impersonator who truly, deeply believes he is God's greatest gift.
Exactly. An ego the size of Jupiter. But here's the critical twist, and this is what makes this little thought experiment interesting. I want you to imagine that this exact same guy, despite all that overwhelming, suffocating calm, fails spectacularly at everything he attempts.
Every single time.
Every single time.
It's such a vivid image, and honestly, for anyone who grew up in that era, it's instantly recognizable. I mean, you're describing a walking contradiction.
Totally. It's the aesthetic of untouchable, cool, paired with just a constant, humiliating defeat.
Which is exactly why we're here.
Right. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are stepping right into the bizarre hair gel slick shoes of Johnny Bravo.
Grab your comb.
Our source material today is this incredibly dense, comprehensive video transcript. We're looking at a full 95-minute analytical breakdown of the entire 1997 to 2004 run of the animated series Johnny Bravo.
And for those tracking the animation history, this was originally produced by the legendary Hanna-Barbera studio.
Yeah, for its first 3 seasons, right?
It served as one of their final major flagship properties before the newly formed Cartoon Network Studios picked up the baton for the 4th and final season.
And we have a massive stack of notes, historical context, and just episode summaries to get through.
This document is an absolute goldmine. I mean, it doesn't just list what happens in the show, it meticulously tracks the evolution of the character.
It really breaks down the show's unique comedic structure, too.
Exactly. It looks at its transition through different animation eras and analyzes some of the most surreal, fever dream plot lines ever broadcast on daytime television.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're going to look way past the surface level slapstick today.
We have to. There's so much more there.
The mission for this deep dive is to really understand the chaotic, surreal, and surprisingly complex world built around this character. We want to figure out how a show about a relentlessly narcissistic, constantly rejected protagonist started as this quirky, somewhat standard character study, and somehow
morphed into something insane.
Yeah, it morphed into a massive boundary-pushing canvas for bizarre genre parodies, surreal animal romances, and unbelievable celebrity cameos. We want to look at the mechanics of the humor.
What's fascinating here is how the show utilizes Johnny as a completely immovable anchor within a wildly fluctuating universe.
He really is an anchor, isn't he?
He is. He possesses this overwhelming, almost pathological ignorance, right? Punctuated by his trademark, "Oh mama," catchphrase. And the writers quickly figured out a brilliant structural secret.
Which was?
That no matter how absurd the environment gets, and we are talking about a setting that frequently introduces aliens, ancient monsters, and global conspiracies, without warning, Johnny's delusion remains the one constant.
His towering ego is literally the grounding force that keeps the chaos from flying off the rails.
Exactly.
So to understand that chaotic world, we first have to fully understand the guy standing at the dead center of it. Johnny Bravo's core identity is defined by a single dominating trait.
His unshakable confidence in the face of brutal reality checks.
Right. Just constant physical reality checks. He's a guy who lives in a perpetual, agonizing state of rejection, yet he wakes up every single morning genuinely believing he is evil.
The universe provides him with a relentless stream of negative.
Yeah.
I mean, he is hit, thrown, rejected, mocked.
And his brain processes exactly 0% of it.
0. He's built a psychological fortress out of hair products and denial.
It's amazing. And the very first episode, the pilot, lays out this dynamic so perfectly. It essentially serves as a thesis statement for the next 7 years of the show.
The zoo episode.
Yeah. Johnny decides to spend his afternoon at the Aaron City Zoo, but his primary objective isn't to look at the exhibits or, enjoy a walk.
Of course not.
He goes to the zoo specifically to pick up women, and immediately his forward, highly aggressive flirting style gets him tased by a random woman walking.
Which I have to say is a remarkably grounded, realistic consequence for street harassment.
Especially for a cartoon in the late 90s.
Right. The show establishes early on that his actions have immediate, painful consequences.
But the realism lasts for about 5 seconds before it violently spirals. A frantic zookeeper comes sprinting past him. She stops just long enough to reveal that their prized 900-pound gorilla has escaped its enclosure.
And is just missing in the city.
So Johnny, seeing an attractive woman in distress and trying to win her affection, instantly vows to track down this gorilla. He starts bragging about his martial arts skills, citing a black belt, fully casting himself in the role of an action hero. He goes marching through the city, and he ends up spotting this massive, burly, incredibly hairy human man.
Oh, this part is so good.
Johnny genuinely thinks this guy is the gorilla. He taps the man on the shoulder, asks if he's seen a gorilla, and the man just points him down an alley in the opposite direction.
The dramatic irony being that Johnny completely misses the actual 900-pound gorilla, who is simultaneously having a completely separate altercation just a few feet away.
The show loves doing that.
It does. It'd love to let you see the joke long before Johnny ever does.
So the real gorilla has accidentally run into a mugger in the alley. The gorilla, being a massive wild animal, easily overpowers the mugger, beats him to a pulp, and during the scuffle, the mugger calls the gorilla giant and ugly.
Which Johnny overhears.
Yeah, Johnny overhears this commotion, runs over, and sees the human mugger lying unconscious on the ground. Because Johnny's brain operates on the simplest, most literal logic possible, he grabs the burglar, restrains him, and is fully convinced this is the missing wild animal.
Simply because the mugger matches the verbal description of being giant and ugly.
Exactly. When the zookeeper finally catches up, she doesn't even acknowledge Johnny's triumph. She just walks right past him, grabs her actual gorilla by the hand, and leaves.
And Johnny's reaction is the defining moment of his character.
He's still holding the unconscious mugger in his arms, right? He looks at the zookeeper and asks if he's going to be rewarded with a kiss or a date for his heroism.
And she just looks at him, completely deadpan, and says it looks like he's already found a date.
Leaving him standing in an alley holding a criminal, it encapsulates his entire existence.
It locks in the formula that the writers would use for the rest. I mean, he acts out of pure, unadulterated vanity.
He misinterprets the situation entirely due to his lack of observation.
He exerts a massive amount of physical effort based on that misinterpretation, and the payoff is absolute public humiliation.
Thinking about that formula brings to mind a specific analogy. I was reading this and thinking it's almost like the writers created a reverse Wile E. Coyote.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Think about classic Looney Tunes. While E. Coyote is obsessively chasing the Roadrunner out of biological hunger, we sympathize with him because he's starving and he's using all these elaborate Acme gadgets.
Right, there's a primal drive.
But Johnny is obsessively chasing women out of pure vanity. And the anvil falling on his head isn't usually a literal anvil from the sky, though occasionally the animators do use that. It's a constant heavy barrage of pepper spray, literal animal attacks, getting tased, and just staggering social humiliation.
So true.
So why do you think you and I, the audience, root for a guy who is so inherently self-centered? Because, I mean, if you met this guy at a bar in real life, he would be completely unbearable.
That is the million-dollar question for character design. And honestly, it is the secret to the show's entire comedic engine. The humor only functions because Johnny never wins.
He has to lose.
He has. Think about the alternative. If Johnny were successful in his advances, if he actually charmed these women with his aggressive, boundary-pushing, entitled tactic, he would be a monster.
He'd be an unlikable predator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But because his narcissism is constantly brutally punished by the universe itself, he becomes a safe target for our laughter. The universe's cruelty balances out his toxicity.
He is the eternal loser.
And he bounces back from these horrific rejections without learning a single lesson. That resilience transforms him from a creep into a lovable buffoon. We are laughing at the destruction of hubris. We were laughing at his ego being deflated, not at the women he's annoying.
Right. He functions as a punching bag with great hair. We get the catharsis of seeing the arrogant guy get knocked down over and over. But the notes highlight that the show didn't just use Johnny as a static punching bag.
No, they pushed it much further.
The writers actually used him as a lens to take some surprisingly sharp jabs at the broader dating culture of the 1990s. The episode The Sensitive Male is heavily featured in the transcript as a masterclass in deconstructing 90s gender.
Oh, The Sensitive Male is arguably one of the most philosophically layered episodes in the entire Hanna-Barbera run. It tackles the emerging discourse of that era perfectly.
The setup is class. Johnny is striking out at the local park. He tries flexing his biceps, doing his usual macho chest-puffing routine, and a woman flat out rejects, visibly.
Typical Tuesday for Johnny.
Right. But then Johnny pauses. He watches this short, older, very bashful, unassuming man approach the exact same woman. The oldie man presents her with flowers. He nervously stammers about how beautiful her eyes are, acting incredibly timid.
And boom, the woman instantly.
She accepts his date invitation and gives him her phone number. Johnny watches this happen and his mind blown. The alpha male approach failed, but the timid approach worked.
So he sprints over and begs this man to teach him his secrets.
And the older man enthusiastically obliged. In true golden era animation style, he literally breaks into a song and dance number for Johnny.
He sings about how women dig a man with depth and how Johnny needs to completely overhaul his personality to show vulnerability and sensitivity. It is the classic quintessential nice guy playbook being handed down as sacred text.
The mentor starts giving Johnny these highly specific, supposedly observational tactics to try out. They're standing on the sidewalk and they see a woman walking toward them, pushing a baby stroller and holding a dog on a...
And the mentor tells Johnny to just notice she has a dog.
Yeah, just compliment the dog.
The advice is fundamentally about faking interest in a woman's life to manufacture an entry point. So Johnny, armed with this new knowledge, marches over to execute the observational technique.
Which goes terribly. He confidently strides up, fully intending to pet the dog, but he completely miscalculates his own massive physical strength. He swings his arm down, violently knocks the baby stroller out of the way, and the dog somehow gets launched off the sidewalk, goes flying down the street, and plummets off a massive bridge.
The animation style pivots instantly there, from conversational comedy to kinetic, violent chaos. And of course, the mentor, who inexplicably and conveniently happened to be standing on the jagged rocks at the bottom of the gorge below the bridge, effortlessly catches the falling dog.
Of course he does.
He returns the dog to the weeping woman, and she rewards him with a passionate kiss for being a hero.
So Johnny sees the mentor succeed again, and he doubles down. He thinks, okay, the observational thing went poorly. Let me try the get in touch with your feminine side advice.
Oh, no.
He spots a woman wearing a very traditional frilly dress and bright lipstick. He approaches her, trying to embody what he thinks femininity is. The woman looks at him, laughs hysterically, and walks away.
But his attempt at being delicate ends up attracting the attention of two burly sailors walking by.
Yes, they become entirely enamored by his sudden display of sense. The show frequently employs these sudden visual and narrative gags that completely subvert Johnny's hypermasculine self-image.
It plays with the fluidity of attraction in a way that was pretty rare for children's programming at the time.
Having failed at observation and femininity, he tries the polite manners approach. The mentor tells him to just be courteous. Johnny walks up to a sophisticated woman sitting by a decorative fountain. He leans in and says, "Pardon me, hot sexy mama."
It's this utterly hilarious, doomed blend of his innate, unavoidable sleaziness crashing into an attempt at refined politeness.
The woman is so deeply unamused by this contradiction that she reaches into her purse, pulls out a coin, tosses it into the fountain, and explicitly wishes for a herd of buffalo to trample.
And the universe, listening closely, instantly summons a massive herd of wild buffalo out of thin air, and they violently run him over.
I love how the environment itself acts as a defensive mechanism. The universe responding instantly to a woman's desire to see Johnny physically harmed is a massive recurring motif.
It really is. But the narrative ending of this specific episode is what elevates it from a standard cartoon to sharp cultural satire.
Right, later that night, sitting on a park bench covered in hoofprints, Johnny finally gives up. He turns to the older mentor and admits defeat. He says this sweet, sensitive, observational stuff just doesn't work for him. It doesn't fit his heart.
And here is where the massive twist drops.
The mentor looks around to make sure nobody is listening, and he completely drops the timid act. His posture. He tells Johnny that he doesn't actually mean a single polite set.
He explicitly, proudly states
Right.
that he merely pretends to be thoughtful and considerate.
He launches into this long, villainous rant about how he will say absolutely anything a woman wants to hear, no matter how degrading to his own dignity, simply to manipulate her into a date.
If you take a step back and connect this to the bigger picture of what was happening in society at the time, the show is offering a fiercely cynical critique of 90s dating dynamics.
The writers are making a profound point.
Yeah, that it's not just Johnny who is flawed. Yes, Johnny's an overt, obvious, unapologetic meathead. You see him coming from a mile away. But the so-called nice guy, represented by this mentor, are exposed as deeply manipulative frauds.
They're using the language of sensitivity and feminism as a Trojan horse for the exact same underlying entitlement Johnny has.
And the show punishes the mentor for it.
Yes. As he is in the middle of his rant about how he fakes his entire personality, all the women from earlier in the day, the one from the bench, the one with the dog, the one at the fountain, suddenly step out from behind.
They heard everything.
Every single word. They angrily tackle him, tie him up with the dog's leash, and violently drag him away into the night. And Johnny is left standing alone under a streetlight. He watches the mentor get dragged away, looks genuinely disgusted, and mutters, "What a jerk."
Even Johnny Bravo finds the covertly manipulative nice guy routine to be morally repulsive.
It's a brilliant subversion of the audience's expectation. The narrative argues that while Johnny severely lacks self-awareness and social grace, he operates completely without malice. What you see is exactly what you get.
He is honest in his vanity. The mentor is actively deceptive, which the show's moral compass frames as a much more severe.
Sincerity. The fact that Johnny is sincerely, honestly misguided brings us to another major theme. Johnny's intense delusions of grandeur. He truly, deeply believes he's capable of monument, even when every shred of empirical evidence.
There is a fantastic sequence in the breakdown where he attempts to become a literal, actual superhero.
The Bravo Man saga. Little Susie, the incredibly smart, precocious element kid next door who views Johnny less as a neighbor and more as a bizarre test subject, needs a project for her class.
So she drags Johnny into her class
and completely fabricates a story to her teacher, claiming that Johnny is a renowned superhero named Bravo. Johnny's initial reaction is actually to deny it. He doesn't want to play along with the kid.
But the exact second the attractive school teacher mentions that she has a personal weakness for superheroes, his ego takes.
He leans into the lie. He starts asking the classroom full of children, "Want to see me comb my hair really fast?"
Because in his deeply skewed perception of reality, his personal grooming habits are a feat of superhuman ability. He equates vanity with heroism.
But the lie catches up to him. A real crisis suddenly unfolds. The bank directly across the street from the school gets robbed by an actual a guy named Sweet Cheeks, who is entirely powered by candy and sugar.
And the local police are on the scene, but the moment they realize Bravo Man is in the classroom, the officers happily abandon their post.
They decide to go get donuts and leave the entire hostage situation to Johnny. So Johnny is forced to cross the street and physically fight Sweet Cheeks.
Bringing he loses.
Repeatedly, violently, and embarrassed. He is completely physically outmatched by a villain made of nougat. Sweet Cheeks even manages to kidnap Little and threatens to use a laser to turn her into a giant chocolate.
The stakes in the show have this incredible ability to escalate from impressing a teacher to preventing a child from being transmuted into candy in a matter of seconds. It's a hallmark of the writing.
But the resolution to this massive conflict isn't based on skill or hair. It is pure accidental luck. Johnny is so badly beaten up, bruised, and covered in street mud that he pauses the fight to try and wash his face nearby fire hose.
He cares more about his complexion than the hostage situation.
Exactly. The water pressure from the hose is way too strong for him. He loses control, the hose starts wildly spraying high-pressure water everywhere, and stream happens to hit Sweet.
Because Sweet Cheeks is made entirely of sugar, the water instantly melts him into a puddle.
Johnny literally saves the city by failing to wash his own face correct, and the elementary kids still view him as a god. But just when he thinks he has finally earned the right to woo the attractive teacher, a real chiseled superhero named Pretty Boy swoops in through the window, sweeps the teacher off her feet, and flies away with her.
The universe snatches the victory away at the absolute last possible second. The writers allow him the illusion of victory, just so the subsequent defeat stings more.
This concept of accidental, highly temporary success is a massive pillar of his character arc.
You see the exact same structural narrative play out in The Man with the Golden Gut.
Oh, the Golden Gut is a body horror master disguised as a cartoon. Johnny is, as always, obsessing over his physical vanity. He is watching late-night television and orders a highly suspicious piece of exercise equipment called the Abdominizer 9.
When it arrives in the mail, he unpacks it, and it visually resembles a medieval torture rack.
It has pulleys, spikes, and gears, but he straps himself into it anyway. And through some horrifying combination of severe rope burn, internal bruising, and extreme physical exertion, he inadvertently sculpts his stomach muscles into an exact, highly detailed, three-dimensional replica of Mount Rushmore.
The animators didn't just give him a six-pack. They drew the actual faces of Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln protruding from his abdomen.
He turned his torso into a literal national monument. And Pops, the greedy, cynical diner owner who serves as a sort of terrible father figure to Johnny and is always looking for a quick grift, immediately recognizes the financial potential.
He exploits Johnny's mutation.
Pops turns the diner into a freak show attraction. They start charging admission. They're making a fortune. The transcript notes that Pops even starts manufacturing and selling $25 baby blankets featuring screen-printed images of Johnny's mutated stomach.
It's a whole cottage industry.
But Johnny, being fundamentally lazy and lacking any real discipline, gets rich and immediately stops training. He complains that the Abdominizer makes him all sweaty. He spends his new fortune eating nothing but greasy diner food and junk.
And the inevitable biological consequence arise to restore the balance.
He is booked for a massive, highly publicized reveal in front of a paying crowd. He stands on stage, grabs the hem of his shirt, pulls it up to show off Mount Rushmore, and the audience gasps in horror.
Because the lack of exercise and terrible diet has caused the monument to collapse.
His stomach is just a tangled, massive, drooping blob of flabby mush. The crowd erupts into anger, demanding refunds. The fame evaporates instantly, Pops is ruined, and they lose absolutely everything they built.
If you synthesize the narratives of both Bravo Man and the Golden Gut, the overarching ironclad rule of the Johnny Bravo universe reveals itself. Johnny's success must always be accidental, and more importantly, it must be strictly temporary. The cosmic order of the show strictly prohibits him from maintaining elevated social status, financial wealth, or genuine earned heroism.
The status quo of him being a charmingly pathetic, working-class loser must be maintained at all costs.
The universe will literally alter his anatomy to ensure he failed.
That concept that the universe is actively working against him brings us to an incredible pivot point in the show's history. Because if his approach to human women, everyday heroism, and local fame is chaotic, it is absolutely nothing compared to what happens when the writers decided to remove the guardrails of reality entirely.
They really took the training wheels off.
They took his lack of self-awareness and essentially weaponized it against the laws of nature, biology, and physics. If his human dates end in disaster, his dates with non-humans are absolute, unadulterated.
The transition into anthropomorphic and supernatural storylines is where the show really started flexing its creative muscle. They stopped relying solely on 50s greaser tropes and leaned into pure, unfiltered absurdity.
Absurdity feels like an understatement. Let's break down the mechanics of the episode Date with an Antelope. This episode tackles the very dawn of early online dating. Remember, this is the late 90s, dial-up internet, AOL chat rooms.
The Wild West of the web.
Johnny is dabbling in cyberspace, feeling desperate. He thinks he has successfully set up a blind date with a hot mama who goes by the screen name Carol. He gets dressed up, shows up to the meeting spot, and discovers that Carol is a literal, biological, four-legged.
And the animation framing here is crucial. They do not draw a woman in an antelope suit. They don't draw a humanoid mutant. They draw a standard National Geographic-style grazing animal.
And they play the reveal completely dead. No wacky musical sting, no exaggerated jaw drop from John.
Johnny's reaction is the funniest. He processes the visual information that his date is a wild herd animal, and he just decides to play it cool.
He is committed to the date, so he is going to go through with it. He gets into her car, and he has to endure her terrifying, erratic driving because she has hooves instead of hands.
They go to a local carnival. She gets on a carousel, bucks wildly, and physically launches Johnny off the ride and into a circus cannon.
Then they decide to go to a high-end, fine dining restaurant. The maitre d' attempts to turn them away at the door, stating explicitly that they only serve humans. But then the maitre d' suddenly squints, recognizes Carol the antelope, and says, "Oh, Carol, your father went to prep school with me, right this way."
It makes zero logical sense. The world bends to accommodate the madness.
And then comes the dinner order. Johnny orders a seafood crab platter. Carol orders a plate of turf grass. She politely informs Johnny that she just chews the same bite of cud for hours on end.
The mechanics of the scene force the audience to ask the obvious question. Why does an antelope have an online dating profile? And why does she want to date a human man in a black t-shirt?
The motive is the best. Over dinner, Carol shyly admits to Johnny that she isn't actually interested. She's only using him to make her possessive boyfriend incredible, teach him a lesson about.
And Johnny, whose desperation knows absolutely no bounds, except this horrific premise.
He doesn't leave. He just casually asks if he should be worried about her angry boyfriend showing up to the restaurant. And right on cue, the literal boiled crab sitting on Johnny's dinner plate suddenly jumps to life.
The crab reveals that he is Carol the antelope's jealous boyfriend.
The crab leaps off the plate and violently attacks Johnny's face with its claws. A massive, chaotic brawl erupts in the middle of the fine dining establishment. The police are called, and the episode ends with all of them locked in a single jail cell together.
Johnny, Carol the four-legged antelope, and the crab boyfriend, who is now his cellmate, screaming at him from a prison cot.
The narrative escalation there is a perfect example of how the writers operated. They took a very standard, relatable sitcom trope, the bad online blind date, the catfishing, the terrible driver, the jealous ex-boyfriend crashing the dinner, and they simply mapped those mundane tropes onto a completely deranged savanna ecosystem and a crust.
They're playing a familiar tune on completely broken instruments.
And the craziest part is that he doesn't learn from the antelope incident. It happens again. Look at the episode Wilderness Protection Program.
Oh, this one is wild.
Johnny is casually walking down the street when he is abruptly approached by a mysterious Men in Black-style government. The agent forces Johnny into a witness protection scenario. He is set up as a fake husband to provide cover for a key witness who is hiding from a dangerous mob syndicate.
And the person he is legally obligated to marry, a woman named Becky, who is a massive, overly affectionate moose.
Once again, the show treats the visual of a greaser marrying a giant woodland mammal with total unwavering seriousness.
The backstory that explains why the moose is hiding from the mob is a masterpiece of nonsense. Becky the moose tearfully explains to Johnny that she was trying to make ends meet by working as a cocktail waitress in a 1920s-style speakeasy.
Let's just pause to visualize that for you guys. A giant moose wearing a flapper dress, balancing a tray of martinis in a Prohibition-era night.
Naturally. She explains that while she was serving drinks, she accidentally stumbled into a back room and interrupted a secret, high-level mob meeting.
In her panic, she dropped her purse, which contained her driver's license, and she had to flee into federal hiding. So Johnny agrees to act as her fake husband to protect her from assassination.
The attempt to blend into suburbia by playing the role of an all-American elephant family wearing fake trunks, which is a disguise that makes absolutely no sense.
But the narrative twist arrives when Johnny is brushing Becky's fur. He notices a small green cardboard jigsaw puzzle stuck in her coat. They completely panic. They deduce that this single green puzzle must be the missing key to the mob's master plan to steal all the honey forest bears.
They apply an incredible amount of deductive reasoning to arrive at the most insane possible, so they decide to take action.
They march into the woods and start violently waking up all the hyperweening grizzly bears to warn them about the impending mob hype, which almost gets them mauled to death by sleepy angry bears.
Understandably.
But then, the dreaded mob finally tracks them down. A group of men in suits surrounds them. And it turns out they aren't a mafia syndicate at all. They are just a group of mild-mannered, elderly men from the local Elks Club.
Their entire club is devoted to solving massive jigsaw puzzles.
And they have been suffering from sleepless nights because they couldn't finish their puzzle. They tracked Becky down simply to retrieve the one missing green puzzle that accidentally stuck to her fur while she was waitress.
It is the ultimate Shaggy dog story. It relies entirely on dream logic, where cause and effect are completely untethered from reality.
Hold on, I have to challenge this interpretation for a second. We've been framing this behavior as pure vanity and desperation, but I want to look at the psychology here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a guy accepts a dinner date with an antelope because her crab boyfriend is trying to teach her a lesson, and he legally marries a moose to protect her from a jigsaw puzzle club, we aren't just talking about a big ego anymore. We are talking about a fundamental break from reality.
True.
I genuinely want to know, does the show treat Johnny as someone who is clinically deluded? Does he just lack basic cognitive object permanence? Or is the show suggesting that the universe itself is fundamentally broken, and Johnny's desperation is just so dead that the concept of species ceases to matter?
That is a profound question, and it really strikes at the core of the world building. I don't think the writers are implying cognitive damage in a clinical sense. Instead, it is a function of magical realism.
Magical realism. Okay.
In Errant City, Johnny's driving force, his libido, his overwhelming vanity, and his desperate clawing need for external validation acts as a reality distortion field. It completely overrides all logics, all human survival instincts, and all societal norms.
To Johnny Bravo, a date is a metric of success.
Exactly. The prestige of simply having a date on his calendar drastically outweighs the physical reality of who or what that date actually is. The universe bends to accommodate his singular focus.
And this theory that his ego is stronger than his survival instinct is proven beyond a shadow of a doubt when you examine how he interacts with actual life-threatening supernatural entities.
The supernatural dates are arguably worse than the animal dates because of the physical danger involved.
If you want proof that his survival is broken, look at the episode A Wolf in Chick's Clothes. Johnny is scanning the personal ads in the newspaper again, highlighting his constant desperation, and he sets up a meeting with a woman named Fluffy.
He arrives at the restaurant, and Fluffy is gorgeous. Johnny is thrilled. He thinks he has finally hit the jackpot.
But almost immediately after sitting down, the full moon rises. Fluffy begins to grow hair, her teeth sharpen, and she violently transforms into a massive, snarling werewolf right in front of his eyes.
It's executed as a classic, terrifying horror movie reveal. The lighting changes, the music swells.
A normal human being, faced with a mythical apex predator, runs screaming for the exit. The limbic system takes over, fight or flight. But Johnny's reaction. He pauses, asks her a few clarifying questions, and learns that she will magically revert back into a hot woman at sunrise.
Upon hearing this, his brain does the math, and he just decides to bite the bullet and stick it out.
He spends the entire agonizing night dealing with the sheer chaos of being out in public with a literal monster. She is destroying property, howling, and terrifying citizens, and Johnny is just checking his watch, treating it like a minor inconvenience, just waiting for the sun to come up.
Finally, dawn breaks. The sunlight hits her, she turns back into a beautiful woman, and Johnny smiles, thinking his endurance has finally paid off.
He views surviving a werewolf attack as a necessary transaction to get a kiss.
But the writers have to maintain the status quo. She turns back into a woman, stretches, and casually asks Johnny what day of the week it is.
He checks his calendar and says it's Wednesday. Fluffy frantically gasps and explains that she forgot to mention one tiny, crucial detail in her personal ad. She isn't just a werewolf. On Wednesdays specifically, she doesn't stay a beautiful woman.
She is cursed to transform into a bald, sweaty, extremely annoying short man named Mervyn, who is obsessed with collecting stamps.
And instantly, the beautiful woman morphs into Mervyn, and that is the thing that finally breaks Johnny. He survived the flesh-eating wolf, but the prospect of spending the day with an annoying philatelist bridged too far.
He screams in terror and runs away, with Mervyn chasing after him, asking if he wants to look at rare posts.
He can tolerate the threat of being eaten alive, but he draws a hard boundary at being annoyed by a nerd. It is a brilliant, character-defining punch.
And it happens with vampires, too.
I want you to picture the episode going bad. Johnny is out on the street doing his usual routine, trying to pick up women. He runs into Lois. Lois is a literal vampire who has just recently dumped her vampire boyfriend because she felt their immortal relationship was getting stale.
Lois sees Johnny, recognizes how desperate and malleable he is, and decides to take him on a date purely to make her immortal ex-boyfriend jealous.
The women in Aaron City, regardless of species or mythical origin, constantly use Johnny as a pawn in their own relationship. It is a recurring.
They go to a candlelit Italian restaurant. Johnny, being completely uncultured, inhales a massive plate of garlic pasta. Lois, playing her part, leans across the table to bite his neck.
But as she gets close, she smells the overwhelming stench of garlic on his breath. The vampire mythos kicks in, and she runs away screaming in physical pain.
Meanwhile, the jealous vampire ex-boyfriend has been hiding in the shadows of the restaurant the entire time. And how does this ancient, powerful creature decide to attack Johnny?
He uses dark blood magic to cast a spell on the remaining plate of pasta sitting on the table. The spaghetti noodles come to life, slither across the table, wrap around Johnny's throat, and start strangling.
Johnny Bravo is literally engaged in a life-or-death physical struggle against a pile of carbohydrates.
The visual of a muscular man fighting his dinner is incredible. But the real question is, does this near-death experience by pasta deter Johnny from pursuing the date?
Not in the slightest. He manages to tear the noodles off his neck, survives the carb attack, and he tracks Lois down to a local carnival to continue the date as if nothing happened.
Lois's ex-boyfriend follows them to the carnival. The ex uses his dark magic to manipulate the carnival game, so Johnny loses. Then the ex wins the giant stuffed animal himself, sings Lois a romantic, hypnotic song, and successfully wins her back.
They reconcile right in front of Johnny.
And Johnny's only concern in this entire scenario is looking around and worrying that the other carnival patrons might freak out if they realize vampires are. But then the camera pulls back and the show reveals that the entire restaurant they were at and the entire carnival is heavily populated by vampires, werewolves, and a random gnome.
They all just shrug, form a massive conga line, and Johnny happily joins the back of the line, dancing away into the night.
This specific sequence raises a truly important point about the structural world building of the show. The universe of Aaron City operates on a foundation of inherent, unapologetic, magical realism.
The joke the writers are making isn't simply that monsters, aliens, and talking animals exist in this world. The deeper, much more sophisticated joke is that Johnny's vanity and his single-minded focus on his dating life render him completely, fundamentally apathetic to the existence of the supernatural.
He treats a terrifying werewolf transformation or its sentient, strangling bowl of pus not as reality-shattering events, but merely as minor, annoying hurdles on the way to potentially getting a kiss.
If an event does not directly interfere with his libido, he simply does not care that the fundamental laws of physics are breaking down around him. He is the ultimate solid.
That is such a profound philosophical way to look at a guy who just wanted to conga with Dracula, but understanding that magical realism actually provides the perfect bridge to our next topic.
Hemioeconomy.
Yes, because it is one thing to build an animated world where a character interacts with fictional werewolves and antelope. It is an entirely different, much more bizarre level of meta-comedy when you realize how the show handles his interactions with actual real-life celebrities and pop culture icons.
If magical realism grounds his monster date, how does the show ground the absurd when actual famous human beings walk into the frame?
The celebrity cameos in Johnny Bravo are legendary within the animation, and they serve a very specific structural purpose that goes far beyond cast.
Let's start by looking at the Hanna-Barbera legacy crossover. Because Johnny Bravo was initially a flagship Hanna-Barbera production, the creators had full access to the studio's massive historical vault of characters.
And they use that access brilliantly in the iconic episode, Bravo Doobie-Doo. Johnny is driving down a dark, winding forest road in the middle of the night, and his car breaks. He's stranded. He sees headlights approaching and flags down a passing van.
It is, of course, the mystery machine.
It is a phenomenal collision of era. You have this defining piece of 1970s television history, the Scooby Gang crashing directly into this cynical 90s meathead.
He asks the gang for a ride to his aunt's house. Initially, Fred and Velma are highly reluctant to let this strange, aggressive man into their van.
But the moment Johnny mentions that his aunt lives in a creepy, abandoned-looking mansion at the top of a hill, their programming kicks in. Suddenly, they are all entirely on board.
On the ride over, Johnny completely ignores Fred and spends the entire trip aggressively hitting on Daphne, making her deeply uncomfortable.
They arrive at the mansion, knock on the door, and discover the aunt is missing. Fred immediately initiates the classic Scooby-Doo protocol. They split up to search.
Johnny, actively trying to maneuver himself into a dark room with Daphne, accidentally gets paired up with Shaggy and Scooby instead.
They wander into the kitchen, open a closet, and a terrifying, glowing, ghoulish gardener ghost out. This triggers a massive, beautifully animated, classic chase montage, complete with the bubblegum pop music.
The ghost is chasing Johnny and Shaggy down endless hallways while wielding a supernatural weed whack.
The animators did a phenomenal job integrating Johnny's specific, stiff character design into the very fluid, specific visual language of a 1970s Scooby-Doo chase. It feels like a genuine artifact of that era.
It really does. The chase ends when Johnny gets his shirt caught on a massive crystal chandelier. The chandelier pulls free from the ceiling, falls directly onto the glowing ghost, and traps it underneath the glass.
The rest of the gang runs into the room. Fred steps forward, and they execute the classic unmasking trope. They pull the glowing rubber mask off the gardener ghost. And who is underneath? It is Johnny's.
And here is where the episode elevates from a simple crossover into a brilliant deconstruction of the genre. We have to look at her motive.
Exactly. Normally, in any standard episode of Scooby-Doo, the villain unmasked at the end is a disgruntled real estate developer trying to drive down property, or a greedy museum curator looking for hidden pirate gold.
But what is the motive?
The aunt explains that she staged this incredibly elaborate, highly dangerous supernatural haunting purely because she deeply passionate. She knew he was coming to visit, and she wanted to scare him away before he reached the front door so she wouldn't have to spend the weekend listening to him talk about his hair.
That is her entire criminal motivation. She just finds her nephew deeply annoying.
It perfectly surgically skewers the established Scooby-Doo formula. The writers took this convoluted, highly theatrical criminal enterprise involving glowing suit, fake weapons, an elaborate trap, and reduced the grand motivation petty, highly relatable.
It takes the cartoon logic of the 70s and grounds it in the cynical, character-driven frustration of the 90s.
And if that is how the writers treat legendary cartoon royalty, it is fascinating to see how they treat real-world celebrities. The notes detail these bizarre celebrity interventions. Look at the episode, Luke Perry's Guide to Love.
Luke Perry, who at the time was the quintessential 90s television heartthrob from Beverly Hills 90210.
The actual actor, Luke Perry, voicing himself. The plot kicks off when Johnny accidentally saves Luke Perry from being trampled by a massive mob of crazed fangirls in the city. Out of gratitude, Luke agrees to walk Johnny through one single success.
He realizes Johnny needs extreme intervention, so they set up a classic Cyrano de Bergerac dynamic.
Luke Perry dresses up in a disguise as a hot dog vendor, parks his cart across the street from the cafe, and feeds Johnny smooth, charming lines through a hidden earpiece. Johnny doesn't have to think. He just has to repeat exactly what Luke Perry whispers.
And miraculously, because Johnny isn't using his own brain, it works. The woman is charmed, and he secures a formal dinner date for later that night.
He finds success only when he completely suppresses his own personality and acts as a biological puppet for a celebrity.
They move to the fancy restaurant for the actual date. Luke Perry is still outside, still feeding Johnny lines, this time using a high-tech microphone disguised as a silver fork from a neighboring table. The date is going perfect. The woman is swooning.
Luke Perry, watching through the window, decides his work as a mentor is done and prepares to leave. But as he is jogging away from the restaurant, he trips on the sidewalk.
The microphone fork flies out of his hand, bounces across the street, and lands on the floor in the middle of an incredibly intense, very loud yoga studio class.
You can see the cascading disaster coming from a mile away, and it is a beautiful setup. Inside the restaurant, the date leans across the bowl, gazes into Johnny's eyes, and asks to tell her those romantic.
Johnny, having learned absolutely nothing, still relying entirely on the earpiece, waits for the prompt. But the audio he starts receiving is from the yoga instructor across the street.
So Johnny, dutifully repeating his instructions, suddenly jumps on top of the fine dining table. He starts contorting his body into intense yoga poses, screaming instructions about downward dog, and making weird, aggressive breathing sounds.
The date is completely horrified, assumes he is mocking her, throws her drink in his face, and storms out of the restaurant.
He snatches defeat from the jaws of victory. It is the Wile E. Coyote mechanism again. The gadget fails at the absolute worst possible moment.
And the celebrity interventions weren't just limited to dating advice. They tackled his childhood psychology, too.
In the episode Tease for Trouble, the legendary Mr. T shows up. Why? Because he is finally getting around to answering a fan letter Johnny wrote to him when Johnny was in elementary.
Johnny's revealed to be suffering from deep psychological trauma caused by a childhood bully named Little Ricky Simmons. Ricky used to bully Johnny relentlessly, constantly flipping him on his back and mocking him with the nickname Johnny Flat on Your Back.
Which is a remarkably specific, slightly pathetic childhood trauma to carry into a...
So Mr. T, acting as a bizarre life coach, takes Johnny under his wing. But Mr. T's training methods are completely insane.
To teach Johnny how to tackle his deep-seated fears, he forces Johnny into a ring to physically fight a literal toucan. Johnny gets absolutely desperate by this trauma.
Then, shifting gears entirely, Mr. T takes him to the kitchen and teaches him how to make a healthy after-school snack alternative using celery stalks, peanut butter, and raisins. He teaches him how to make ants on a log.
The lesson apparently being that one must never underestimate the tactical power of healthy snack prep combat.
Exact. Finally, to assert psychological dominance and break the cycle of fear, Mr. T forces Johnny to confront his childhood bully. But he makes Johnny do it while wearing a frilly pink Little Bo Peep dress.
Johnny, terrified but trusting Mr. T, walks over to Ricky's house wearing this dress. The twist is that Ricky has grown up to be a completely well-adjusted adult.
Ricky genuinely apologizes for being a bully in elementary school and reaches out to shake Johnny's hand to call a truce.
But Johnny's trauma is triggered. He gets scared, Ricky's instincts kick in, and he flips Johnny on his back. Ricky is leaning over, about to give Johnny a humiliating wet willy.
Johnny is panicking, but then he remembers his training. He reaches into his pocket, constructs the celery and peanut butter snack at lightning speed, and forcefully shoves it into Ricky's mouth.
The snack is so unexpectedly delicious that Ricky is stunned, calms down, and calls a genuine lasting. Johnny defeats his bully with fiber.
The sheer narrative whiplash of that sequence, from fighting a toucan to making snacks to cross-dressing to resolving a physical conflict with celery, is staggering. The writers are throwing everything at the wall.
It is incredible, but I was thinking about this dynamic. Usually when you watch a cartoon, a celebrity cameo is just a quick, disposable wink to the audience. You know, hey kids, look, it's that famous guy. They show up, say a catchphrase, and leave.
But in Johnny Bravo, the celebrities are drafted as active, deeply involved participants in Johnny's humiliation.
It's almost like a twisted, animated version of reality shows, Queer Eye or What Not to Wear. These highly successful experts show up to fix his broken life. They hand him all the necessary tools for success, but the subject completely refuses to learn, grow, or act.
I want to ask you about the curation here. Why do you think the show relied so heavily on these specific 1980s and 1990s icons, and why specifically cast them in these failed mentor roles?
It is a brilliant, deeply intentional, creative choice by the show. To understand the cameo curation, you have to look at who Johnny fundamentally is on a concept.
Johnny Bravo himself is a walking, talking anachronism.
His entire identity, the pompadour hair, the cadence of his voice, the leather jacket attitude is ripped straight out of a 1950s, but he is inexplicably trapped living in the late 90s. He is completely, hopelessly out of era.
By bringing in massive 1980s icons like Mr. T, or defining 1990s icons like Luke Perry, or even 1970s icons like Farrah Fawcett, who, by the way, he famously tries to meet in one episode by violently beating up a Barney-esque educational purple dinosaur named Smarmy just to steal his costume to get past security.
The show aggressively highlights Johnny's pop culture displays. He respects, he worships. He views them as gods of masculinity and success.
But his internal operating system is so outdated that he's entirely unequipped to utilize their modern wisdom. They represent the cultural zeitgeist actively passing him by, leaving him stranded in the past.
That framing makes so much sense. He is a man stranded in time, reaching out to these cultural touchstones, but failing to grasp them. And the show treated these icons with such beautiful, egalitarian surreal.
To close out our analysis of the cameo economy, We have to talk about the basketball game episode. The transcript highlights Back on Shaq.
If you are looking for the absolute pinnacle of the show's cameo absurdity, it doesn't get better than this. Shaquille O'Neal, voicing himself and presented as the massive NBA superstar he was at the time, is suffering from a massive career-ending loop. He cannot make a basket to save his life.
Meanwhile, Johnny is at the game, sitting courtside, aggressively annoying the cheerleaders on the sideline.
One of the cheerleaders finally gets fed up, shoves Johnny with all her might, and Johnny goes flying across the court. He violently collides with Shaq right at the exact moment Shaq is attempting a desperate jump.
The physical collision alters the trajectory of the ball, and the shot goes in. The buzzer sounds, and Shaq wins the game.
Shaq, being highly superstitious, determines that Johnny's presence is magical. He concludes that Johnny possesses a super strong good luck energy, an energy that Shaq believes is directly derived from Johnny's creepy, relentless persona.
Shaq decides he cannot play without. He makes Johnny his official personal good luck charm. They become an unstoppable, inseparable duo.
They are attending red carpet events together, getting their faces on the covers of sports magazines. Johnny is
the baseline premise that Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most dominant physical athletes in human history, fundamentally requires a delusional 1950s greaser to act as his magical talisman is already incredibly funny. But the escalation is what makes it art.
The escalation comes when Shaq has to face his ultimate nemesis in a high stake. And who is Shaquille O'Neal's basketball nemesis in the Johnny Bravo?
It is the actor Seth.
And Seth Green isn't intimidated by Shaq's winning streak because Seth Green has brought his own magical good luck charm to the basket. And who is Seth Green's charm? It is Huckleberry Hound,
a classic blue, slow-talking Hanna-Barbera cartoon dog from the 1950s.
Yes. You have a scenario where Shaquille O'Neal is utilizing Johnny Bravo to physically battle Seth Green, who is utilizing Huckleberry Hound in a televised game of 2-on-2 basketball.
And during the climax of the game, Huckleberry Hound loses his temper, verbally insults a human referee, and gets slapped with a technical foul. It is just glorious, unhinged chaos.
It truly is peak cartoon surrealism. What the writers are executing there is a concept we can call the flattening of the hierarchy.
Think about the components in that scene. They are taking classic cartoon characters from the 1960s, a modern cartoon character from the 1990s, a real-life Hollywood actor, and a real-life NBA superstar, and they are placing all of them on the exact same plane of reality.
They operate by the exact same physical rules. It is a completely egalitarian approach to pop culture. No one is elevated. Everyone is equally ridiculous. It treats a cartoon dog getting a foul with the same gravity as
a flattened hierarchy of reality. That is a brilliant way to phrase it. And it perfectly bridges into the final major theme of our deep dive.
Because the writers didn't just flatten reality when it came to celebrities. They took that same lack of respect for boundaries and applied it to the fundamental pillars of human civilization.
The show doesn't just spoof dating or superhero tropes. It takes mundane, everyday setups and violently escalates them into full-blown, high-stakes genre parodies that spoof the very fabric of society.
It takes the chaotic, nonsensical logic of Johnny's dating disasters and systematically applies it to massive societal institutions. It asks the question, what if the government was as dumb as John?
Let's examine how they tackle the legal system. In the episode Jailbird Johnny, the plot begins with a microscopic infraction.
Johnny is casually walking down the sidewalk. He finishes eating a candy bar, and he carelessly tosses the wrapper over his shoulder, accidentally missing the trash.
A local police officer happens to see this, stops him, and writes him a standard $10 citation for littering.
Johnny, being chronically unemployed and broke, panics. He empties his pockets to show the officer he doesn't have $10. He pulls out a few crumpled dollar bills and some.
The officer maliciously interprets this pocket change as an attempted bribe to get out of the ticket. He arrests Johnny and hauls him into criminal court.
And for the combined crimes of missing a trash can and offering a handful of change, the judge bangs the gavel and sentences Johnny Bravo to 86 consecutive life sentences, maximum security.
Which is a remarkably dark, albeit hilarious, overreaction by the judicial branch. It is a Kafkaesque nightmare right out of the gate.
It gets so much worse. He is transported to the prison, and there has been a clerical typo on his intake. The clerk accidentally spelled his name, Joanie, Joanny Bravo.
Because of this single typo, the automated prison computer system places him in a maximum security women's penitentiary.
And when Johnny tries to point this out, the prison guards absolutely refuse to acknowledge the physical reality of the man standing in front of them, simply stating that the computer system does not make mistakes.
It is the ultimate parody of blind, unthinking bureaucratic nightmare. The institution relies on the paperwork, not reality.
But the genius of the episode is that for Johnny, this clerical error isn't a punishment in Parody. He is the only man locked inside a prison entirely populated by women. He
is thriving. He is happily doing interior design renovations on his prison cell, hanging up curtains, and trying to date his cellmates.
Meanwhile, on the outside, his mother, Bunny Bravo, and Little Susie refuse to accept the verdict. They team up and act like hard-hitting investigative journalists. They somehow manage to track down grainy bank security camera footage from the street corner where the littering occurred.
The footage clearly proves that Johnny didn't drop the wrapper. A gust of wind blew it out of his hand, meaning he is innocent.
They take this evidence directly to the prison warden, who reviews the tape and immediately clears Johnny of all charge. He is a free man.
And Johnny is completely devastated. He drops to his knees and begs to stay in prison.
He starts frantically confessing to horrific crimes he didn't commit just to get locked back up. He is screaming, "I robbed a cop, I hit on Judge Trudy, I'm a menace to society," just to stay locked up.
But the warden forcibly kicks him out into the street. It is a brilliant, complete inversion of the classic wrongly accused man prison drama trope, like The Fugitive or The Shawshank Redemption. Here, exoneration and freedom are framed as the ultimate punishment.
And they didn't just satirize the courts, they aimed right at the highest office in the land. The transcript details red face in the White House. Johnny is taking a public tourist tour of the White House.
He gets bored, makes a wildly ignorant, misogynistic comment out loud regarding the 19th Amendment, and is immediately chased through the halls by an angry mob of female tourists.
He ducks into a restricted room to hide, and he overhears the President of the United States arguing behind closed doors with his daughter. And why are they arguing? Because the president, concerned about national security, is forcing his daughter to date a highly advanced, heavily armed robot boyfriend that the military had built specifically to keep her safe.
She is arguing that she wants to experience life and date a real human boy, as one naturally desires when living in the executive mansion.
Johnny, sensing an opportunity, reveals himself from behind the curtains, turns on his limited charm, and convinces her to sneak out past the Secret Service to go on a date. They escape.
But the punchline is that Johnny is so incredibly, breathtakingly dumb that the president's daughter very quickly realizes the military robot was actually a much better conversation.
During the date, she gets frustrated and literally asks him if he knows anything at all about the tomb of the unknown soldier. Johnny pauses, thinks about it, and genuinely suggests that they should just pry the tomb open and check the guy's name tag.
She gets so profoundly fed up with his ignorance that she pulls out a walkie-talkie and summons the Secret Service herself.
And the episode ends with a dark, hilarious visual. Johnny is shoved into a massive wooden shipping crate, nailed shut, and stored away in a massive Raiders of the Lost Ark-style underground vault deep beneath the White House grounds.
Filed away with all the other rejected, defective robot boyfriend prototypes. He is classified as a failed experiment and kept as a state secret.
This is where I want to marvel at the depth of the writing here. When you hear these summaries back to back, it feels almost fiercely subversive, doesn't it? I mean, think about the commentary. The legal punishment for a $10 littering ticket is 86 consecutive life sentences without parole.
The President of the United States is actively replacing human suitors with cyborg and burying innocent civilians in underground vaults to cover up minor embarrassment.
Is the show explicitly using Johnny's sheer blinding ignorance as a tool to highlight the absurdity, bloat, and danger of power?
I think you are absolutely zeroing in on a core thematic layer that elevated the show beyond its peers. The writers frequently utilized authoritative structure, the courts, the military-industrial complex, the federal government, the prison system, not as bastions of order, but as chaotic, deeply irrational forces.
The joke is never just that Johnny is dumb. That's the surface level.
The deeper joke is that these massive, serious, taxpayer-funded institutions are portrayed as being just as dumb, just as emotionally reactive, and just as deeply flawed as John.
The judicial system that sentences a man to die in prison for 86 lifetimes over a candy wrapper is presented as being just as functionally broken as the man who thinks a mugger is a missing gorilla. It is an equal opportunity satirization of incompetence at every level of society.
Incompetence at every level. And what is amazing is how that incompetence scales up. It starts locally, expands nationally, and eventually goes global and even galactic.
I want to spend some time detailing how the pacing of these plots creates this massive escalate. It is a specific structural tech. Take the episode A Walk on the Stupid Side. Starts incredible.
Johnny agrees to join a local charity walkathon to raise money against baldness. He is sponsored by his mother, his friend Carl, and Little Susie. They agree to pledge a simple 1 penny per mile he walks.
It is a wholesome, community-focused premise, a very standard sitcom setup.
Right, but within the first 30 seconds of the walkathon, Johnny takes a wrong turn at an intersection. He walks off the designated course, but he doesn't stop. He just keeps walking.
He walks out of the city, he walks to the coastline, he steps onto some floating debris and literally walks across the entire Pacific Ocean. He walks through the continent of Asia, he walks across the Middle East, he literally walks all the way to the plains of Africa.
Meanwhile, back home, his sponsors are monitoring his progress on the news. They do the math and realize that because he has relentlessly walked over 3,100 miles and is still going, their penny-a-mile pledge means they collectively owe the baldness charity over $3.6 billion.
They are facing complete financial ruin, so they charter a flight to Africa to physically stop him. Susie uses her genius intellect to build a massive, impenetrable wall of wild elephants across the savannah to block Johnny's path.
But Johnny, completely exhausted, takes his shoes off, and his feet smell so toxically bad from walking across the globe that the wall of elephants violently retreats in disgust.
He pushes forward, but finally his body gives out. He collapses from sheer physical exhaustion just inches before crossing the charity's official finish line, inadvertently saving his friends from multi-billion-dollar bankruptcy.
It is a brilliant culmination of traits. He inadvertently weaponized his own terrible hygiene to defeat the forces of nature, only to be ultimately defeated by his own lack of cardiovascular stamina.
And the escalation pushes past Earth entirely. Look at Bikini Space. Johnny is sitting in a local diner, minding his own business, when he is beamed up UFO.
Two beautiful, highly advanced alien women abduct because their prophecy dictates they need a human to be their supreme king.
They put him through a series of physical tests, which he accidentally passed sheer luck. They crown him king, they give him a sprawling galactic kingdom, complete with a velvet pool table and premium intergalactic cable TV. He has achieved his ultimate wild.
But the moment he sits on his throne and turns on the premium cable TV, the channel happens to be showing a broadcast of a random, muscular earthling man wearing a traditional Scottish kilt.
The two alien women look at the screen, look at Johnny, and immediately decide they find the guy in the kilt much more attractive. They instantly strip Johnny of his crown, dump him down a garbage chute, and throw him out of the spaceship like literal trash, dropping him right back into his neighbor's back.
The irony is breathtaking. He achieves the ultimate pinnacle of his desires, being worshipped as a literal alien king by beautiful women, and he loses the entire empire simply because of basic cable programming.
And the final example of this massive is the $7 million. Starts with a simple mail delivery mix-up. Johnny accidentally receives a letter containing a $7 million federal government grant that was intended for an avant-garde art director.
Johnny, having zero artistic vision, simply decides to keep the money and make the movie himself to get fame.
He hires a famous, temperamental Italian actress, but on the very first day of production, a crew member politely raises his hand and asks a bullet question. Johnny's ego is threatened, so he immediately fires the entire.
He decides he will be the sole director, the lone cameraman, the lighting tech, and all the other actors.
They are supposed to be filming a dramatic scene where astronauts travel, but because Johnny fired the set designers and is completely in charge of location scouting, he breaks into a NASA.
He puts the actress in a real, functional rocket ship. He starts pressing buttons on the control panel, thinking it's a camera rig, and accidentally triggers the launch sequence.
He launches his lead actress into actual freezing outer space.
And what is his reaction to committing international sabotage and potentially killing an actress?
He doesn't care. The episode ends with him sitting alone in a dark theater, eating popcorn, proudly admiring the chaotic, out-of-focus footage of the launch on a projector screen, completely oblivious to the felony he...
What we are seeing across all of these specific examples, from the charity walk to the aliens to the art film, is a very specific, aggressive narrative structure. The writers employ a massive, accelerated snowball effect of storytelling.
A completely mundane premise, walking for charity, opening the wrong envelope, getting a minor traffic ticket, is pushed violently past the point of logical reality within a matter of minutes. The 11-minute runtime of these segments forces a breakneck escalation.
It is actually a sign of incredibly confident, brilliant comedic writing. The pacing respects the viewer's intelligence. The writers refuse to pause and over-explain the joke.
They don't give you time to question why an antelope is driving a car or why the president has robot boyfriends. They demand that the audience just hold on for the ride as the escalation reaches an absolute fever pitch. It is an exercise in escalating momentum.
Holding on for the ride is exactly what it feels like. It is an exhausting, hilarious, beautifully chaotic universe. Which brings us to the end of our journey today. Let's synthesize everything we've unpacked in this massive deep dive.
We have tracked Johnny Bravo from his origin. We watched him start as a simple, highly narcissistic Elvis impersonator getting tased outside a zoo.
We watched him evolve into an intergalactic reject, a supernatural dating disaster who fought off werewolves and pasta, and a celebrity-adjacent buffoon who ruined Luke Perry's life and fought crime with Mr. T.
And through it all, across 7 years of animation, despite his massive, impenetrable ego, his constant, unyielding failure proved to be the actual necessary engine that drove this brilliantly surreal, genre-bending universe.
It really is a masterclass in character design. And if you take a moment to think back to that vivid image we asked you to picture at the very beginning of this discussion, the ultimate untouchable 90s alpha.
If you look at our modern world today, we are constantly surrounded by highly manicured, hyper-curated social media profiles. We are bombarded by Sigma male internet influencers trying to sell us courses on dominance and a relentless, exhausting hustle.
Everyone online is aggressively projecting an image of total control, wealth, and romantic.
When you view Johnny Bravo through that modern lens, he serves as a hilarious, deeply necessary reminder of how incredibly fragile and ridiculous that specific kind of performative masculinity is when it inevitably collides with the chaotic, unpredictable.
Or, in his specific case, a world full of vampire, talking antelopes, and puzzle-solving mobs. His vanity is a massive, visually impressive shield, but it is entirely made of paper. The harder he tries to project strength, the harder the universe pushes back.
A paper shield against a universe that absolutely loves to throw it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It has been a truly wild ride through the streets of Aaron City and the Hanna-Barbera Vault.
But before we officially sign off, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
We have spent the last hour talking about how Johnny was a man entirely out of time, a 1950s relic stranded in the 1990s. But I want you to imagine if Johnny Bravo were to be rebooted today, in our current era.
Armed with an endless array of swipe-based dating apps, Instagram reality filters, a ring light, and maybe even a high-end microphone to start his own unhinged Crypto Bro podcast.
Would he still be viewed as a cartoonish, exaggerated parody of toxic traits? Or would a modern Johnny Bravo simply be a painfully accurate, almost documentary-level reflection of the modern internet?
Think about that the next time you are scrolling, swipe